Welcome to Ketobiography. I'm your host, Robyn. On Ketobiography, we usually ask our guests to share stories of healing using the ketogenic diet. Today's topic will be slightly different, but no less important. We're talking about something that impacts every one of us every day, the air inside our homes. As the experience coordinator for Jaspr, our guest has spent his career uncovering hidden hazards like mold, VOCs, and chemical pollutants, often tracking down the invisible triggers behind fatigue, rashes, and breathing problems. He has helped people not only uncover these threats, but take immediate action to create cleaner, healthier spaces. Please welcome Justin Liberman to Ketobiography. Hello, Justin.
Thank you, Robyn. Appreciate having me here.
Oh, it's so wonderful to have you. I probably have a million questions and can't really narrow it down. So I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about what's happened here in my personal life. I have for probably the past year thought that my house is trying to kill me. Just feeling lethargic all the time, kind of having a general stuffiness, just not feeling well or right. And I couldn't like pinpoint why. And being that I live a clean lifestyle, I feel like I'm pretty healthy. It just seems like I should have been able to pinpoint this issue. So then I heard Mike on Vinnie Tordrich's podcast talking about air scrubbers. And I was like, oh my goodness, it really could be my house. I also happen to have been out of my house for for a month each, two different times in the past 12 months. And when I was gone, I was fine. And when I came back, I felt sick again. So this whole concept of air quality really piqued my interest. And that's why I reached out to Jaspr to talk to you, because I just want to know everything we can know about our air and how they can affect our health and our life. And let's just make us generally more healthy by by considering the fact that the air we breathe is definitely part of what we have to consider in our health journey.
Certainly makes sense to me. Absolutely. It's when you were talking about it's kind of a big, that's sort of the first clue that we see is when you were referencing that, you're feeling off in your house, but you can't really pinpoint it. And a lot of people go through the same thing. And there's a lot of people that, we work with the Jaspr and that have Jaspers is that they're feeling something's off, but they can't really identify exactly what it is. And sometimes it's a little vague, just kind of generally like this maybe tiredness or maybe some kind of odd allergy symptom here or there without any obvious source of it. Sometimes it is more specific. They're really feeling like a very acute symptom, like if it's maybe my coughing goes up at night, or in the mornings I feel like I always wake up with a runny nose kind of thing. So you can have different kind of a variety of ways that your body is telling you that, hey, something's off here. And then ultimately it's kind of up to you to further explore and say, okay, is there anything more specific I should look into? What kind of other stuff might I want to check? But that's usually how a lot of people kind of start on this journey of maybe indirectly understanding the importance of indoor air quality. And that's kind of the other clue too, is that when you're outside of your house and all of a sudden you feel, oh, I feel better, interesting, and you may not have picked up on that before, but when you start to see the pattern, it becomes a lot more obvious that, hey, there's actually some kind of issue with my indoor air. Then it can be a question of seeing what it is, and that's where you can kind of go down really a lot of rabbit holes of, the different allergens and pollutants and contaminants that we find in our everyday spaces. But to kind of give you a brief sort of roundup of it and just to put some context on it, the indoor air that's inside of most homes, and not just homes, but, offices, schools, any kind of indoor space, tends to be 5 to 10 times on average dirtier than your outdoor air. And it's interesting because we kind of as people really just think of pollution as kind of outdoors. We think, okay, I see the cars driving by on the highway and I see, the exhaust fumes from that. And I see the factories off in the distance, that's spewing whatever. And so you think of your pollution as kind of your general outdoor stuff. But you don't really think of pollution that's inside. But as it happens, and as the studies show, you actually have a lot higher concentration of pollutants inside your home. Um, Now, there's going to be a variety. It won't necessarily be like the stuff that, for example, is coming out of a factory smokestack in the distance is the same stuff in your home. But on a kind of a macro level and sort of an overall sense, you do have a lot more concentration of pollutants that's inside your home there. And one of the big reasons for this is because our homes are built very airtight. This really stemmed from the energy efficiency movement, which, at this point, we're probably going back around 50 years, but a lot of homes started to be built way, way more, you could say, kind of packed in. They didn't want to have air leakage, and the whole purpose was to conserve energy costs. So the intention behind it was certainly good, makes a lot of sense. But the problem with that is you're basically turning your home into like a Tupperware container, a plastic box, a bubble. And when there's no way for air to, air will come in, but it can't really go out, it can't really ventilate. That's where you start having these problems with all these pollutants start to accumulate and build up because the air doesn't have anywhere to go. And by that same proxy, the stuff that's in the air can't really go somewhere else either. And so, naturally, you live in your home, you're spending on average probably about 90 to 95% of your life indoors for the average person, at least in Western society. And so from that, then that just means you're having this prolonged exposure day to day of these, 5 to 10 times higher levels of pollutants than you would outdoors. And so that's really how it ends up being that you all of a sudden notice one day that, oh, yeah, I do feel off inside. And then that's kind of where it all started from.
Yeah, and then we start pulling on threads that don't have anything to do with the air that we're breathing because it's just something we don't necessarily think about. So what kind of things could we be exposing ourselves to that would be causing an issue?
Sure. So you could kind of break it down into a few main categories, and this is a lot of the stuff that we've looked at in our past as far as doing indoor air quality assessments, and just kind of testing a lot of houses and seeing what kind of stuff would come up. The main ones that you would find, number one, mold. Mold is it's a pretty big topic, and it can be a topic of contention for a lot of people. Mold is going to be found everywhere, so it's certainly found outdoors. Depending on the climate and weather conditions, you'll have different levels that can change day to day. But mold is everywhere outside, and by that same account, mold is then found inside as well. And you can have indoor mold in sort of two main ways. So the first one is naturally whenever you open your door like to go outside, or if you open the window for some fresh air, mold spores will come in, and this is very normal. So this is where we like to make the kind of caveat that just because mold is found in pretty much every home, not always something to freak out about. You can have a lot of cases where the mold inside a home is very normal, very common species that won't necessarily cause any harm. But the problems can arise where you have the conditions of your home are then making it more sort of attractive for the mold to start growing inside your house. So this is where it's not just, the spores coming in from the outdoors, but the source of the mold is now inside your home taking root. And this could be if you have bad ventilation. So, if the air is very stagnant, it feels very stuffy. That's one of the conditions that makes it a lot easier for mold to start to develop. Another one would be your humidity. So if your humidity levels are very high inside, this is where there's a much greater chance of mold having the ability to develop. And the magic number that I want to throw at you, just for some context, is 60%. So when your relative humidity inside your home is at or starts to go above 60%, the potential for mold to grow becomes a lot higher. It's not a guarantee, but it's a lot higher. So this means that if you can keep your relative humidity below 60%, and the ideal range for just general comfort indoors is typically around low 40s to around 50. If you can be anywhere from, let's say, about 42 to 50% humidity, that's pretty great. That means that it's not too high, that there's a high chance for mold, but obviously you don't want to have humidity too low because there can be other problems with that. It could get very dry sinuses, nosebleeds, that kind of thing. So humidity ideally in that kind of range, but when it's above 60%, the chance for mold becomes a lot higher. And then of course, if you have any kind of a localized water problem, so if you've had a leaky pipe, or something maybe happening behind your shower you're not aware of, or like a roof leak, all of these factors put together is where you can then have mold that's developing inside your home. And the issue can be that you don't necessarily see it. We often think of mold as, oh, the kind of black spots in the wall or in the shower, the very obvious visible stuff, which is certainly true. But you can have cases where you don't actually see mold growing, but there are still elevations inside your home. Again, relating back to those reasons there. And so that's really where it can come up that in those situations, that's where mold becomes and a very much so an air quality problem. So kind of a long answer on that one, but that's one of the main, issues that we'll see in the home. Breaking down the categories as well. Particulate matter, that's kind of a pretty broad term, but particulates is another indoor air issue or contaminant that we will see. And I'll put kind of a disclaimer on it that, particulate matter is a very overarching sort of terminology. Where we get specific with it is PM 2.5. And what I mean by that is particulate matter that is at the 2.5 micrometer size range or less. This is the size where it can very easily enter your body. Your nose hairs kind of act as a natural filter for larger particles, but PM 2.5 that can bypass the nose hairs, get into your lungs, get into your bloodstream, and when you have a sort of a continued exposure to high particulate matter, that can cause some issues as well. For some people it may just be more sneezing, more runny noses. For others, if they have asthma or other kind of sensitivities, you can have a pretty significant health impact when you have high particulate matter. And particulate matter as a whole can come from a lot of different sources as well. So, some of the common everyday items that would be included in that would be things like pollen, inside sources like hair follicles, skin cells. We shed skin every day that ends up in the air. A bit of a nasty one to think about, but unfortunately is very common, is insect parts. Insect fragments is actually a pretty big component of PM 2.5, unfortunately. So those are some of the main ones that you'd see every day inside of your home. But another main source would be if you've had something like a wildfire, that the particulates that are created from fire activity, unfortunately leads to a lot of PM 2.5, and that's the kind of thing that can have a massive outreach, like it'll spread across a very wide area, and then you can have these ongoing, lingering high levels in PM 2.5. So you'll often see when there's a wildfire that's present, even if you're not nearby it, your local air quality index often has high PM 2.5 that's being reported just because the fire activity is spreading it so significantly. So mold, PM 2.5, and I'd say probably the third main one to kind of wrap this topic up would be VOCs, which are, in short, so it means volatile organic compound. This is kind of put simply any kind of chemical that's in the airspace of your home. And VOCs can also come from a lot of sources too. So there are some, you could say, more natural VOCs and kind of an amusing one, but us as we expel gas from our body, that is a VOC. So that's a sort of a normal one, but you can also have more manufactured or man-made VOCs. For example, if you did a recent renovation, your paints, the glues in the material, like the finishes, the varnishing, all these things that go into your renovation, often off-gas VOCs into the home. And so that's another very common one where that would be another indoor air problem. So mold, particulates, VOCs are probably the main ones that we usually are looking at here.
So would like scents, like if you have a cleaning product that gives off the scent or a candle that has a scent, does that count as a VOC as well?
100%. And actually, those things would often be combined as like particulates and VOCs. So, for example, if you had a candle, there would be, depending on the material, there could be VOCs from whether there's a scent in there, or, something that's producing the chemicals, and that when the candle's burning, the VOCs go into the air, and also the smoke and kind of flame or smoke and flame activity from the wick burning, that would release particulates into the airspace. So that would be kind of like a 2-in-1. But if you have any kind of an air freshener or some kind of, like a cleaning spray or some kind of scented device, these are often releasing VOCs directly into your airspace of your home. And, tying it back to the earlier discussion, your home being very airtight, if it's not breathing well, those VOCs aren't really going anywhere. And then ultimately you are being exposed to them at a higher level.
That's pretty interesting. We were talking about off-gassing, the human off-gassing, and then we're going to cover it up with some spray. So then we're double dipping
Right.
in the stuff that we're taking in. So if someone was having an issue, what would be the signs that they're having a problem with the air quality in their home? And then to further deepen that a little further, what could happen if you don't take care of it?
Sure. So some of the signs could be fairly obvious or very obvious. if it was something, a lot of the ones that will come up are general allergy-like symptoms. So, sneezing, coughing, itchy eyes, runny nose, sore throat, sometimes rashes, hives, like these can all be things that are related to the environmental factors of your home. So if these are coming up and you're finding that they're happening more indoors, like if you go out, outside your home and okay, your sneezing kind of stopped and your eyes feel better, and then you go back in and they come back, and this is often obvious when you go on like a trip or something or out for the day, and then they symptoms return inside your home, then that's a pretty clear sign that there's some kind of indoor allergenic activity, something that's causing your body to react in this way. So it's often those acute symptoms that show up as sort of the more obvious ones. You can have those situations where it's not as obvious, and you wouldn't necessarily tie it to being something related to your environment. So a big example of this would be fatigue. If you're feeling like you're just kind of tired in the home and sluggish, but like otherwise, you don't feel sick, you don't feel feverish, you just feel off and drained, and whenever you're in the home, that can be another big factor that, again, there's something off with your indoor environment, your indoor air, that's causing that kind of feeling. Another one could be sleep too. If you find that your sleep quality is not so good, and this one it can be very tricky because you may not pick up on it. Everyone has a bad night of sleep from now and again, but if you're finding that, hey, I'm really feeling that the last while my sleep's just been not good, and you can't figure out why, you're trying to go to bed earlier, you're trying to not to eat too early or too close to bedtime, and you're trying to do the things, maybe stretch or whatever it is, but nothing seems to be helping, and your sleep is just not really good. That again can be a sign that there is likely something off with your indoor air, and your indoor environment is causing issues with your sleep there. So those would be sort of the main kind of, you could say, like first steps of identifying that something's is off. And then to answer the second part of your question, Robyn, about what are the issues that can come up with that, I mean, this will certainly depend on the individual. Someone who's in a healthier state can probably take on those kind of issues for longer, but it can still wear people down, and you can have cases, and maybe sounds a bit like you're describing with yourself, where generally a pretty healthy person, you try to take care of, being very conscious of the food you eat and the water you're drinking and that kind of thing, and your exercise. But if your home environment is in a bad state, you're fighting this constant battle. And one thing that Mike really likes to mention is that you can't detox your body if you're not detoxing your home. You're detoxing your environment. That's the first step, because this is the space that you were in for such a long period of time, day to day. So if that's in a bad state, it's really difficult for your own body then to start fighting off these other issues and then helping to kind of recover and get into a more improved health state.
That's really interesting. You can't detox your body if you don't detox your home. So what would be some suggestions on how we could detox our home?
Sure. So there's a few very quick steps that one can take just to kind of these immediate action items that we really like to talk about. So one of the first ones is going to be ventilation. This is a hugely important aspect of air quality that is often overlooked. And ventilation, put simply, is that your home's ability to breathe. And this can be done in a few ways. The easiest one would be, open a window and get some direct fresh air. Bonus if you can open windows kind of across, so like if you're home, if you have one on one side, one on the other, getting a cross breeze, that will help to really improve the ventilation. And this is also something that, when you talk about it, like it sounds very obvious, like, oh yeah, just get fresh air. But what you're actually doing, this is the part that maybe isn't thought about, by improving your ventilation and your fresh air, you're directly diluting carbon dioxide in your home. So carbon dioxide, this is often thought of as like an outdoor pollutant that, comes from car exhaust and other things, and general pollution. And, we think about CO2 in the atmosphere, but the main source of CO2 inside is from us. We are, when we talk, when we breathe, we exhale, we're releasing CO2. And so when your home is not ventilated well, that CO2 is accumulating and you have less direct oxygen inside your space. That can lead to some of those issues of, fatigue, brain fog, just general kind of tiredness or sluggishness. And when you improve your ventilation, you're directly removing the CO2 and you're helping to bring in fresh oxygen. That's a huge aspect of improving your air quality in a very fast and simple way. It's just getting that ventilation going. So that would be one way to do it. Another way that will work quite well is if you actually have it built into your HVAC system, your ventilation system in the home. And a lot of newer homes actually have these, but it would be referred to as an air exchange device. And ultimately, what this is doing is it's helping to exchange the air. So it's helping to remove that CO2, dilute, the stale air, and bring in fresh air and help to move the air more efficiently throughout your home. But it's actually doing this without having to open a door or a window. Again, it's built into the HVAC system. A lot of newer homes actually have this by default, like it's a building standard for new homes, just because of the importance of it, of having that improved ventilation, and it's doing so in an energy efficient way. So this is where you can look at the innovations of energy efficiency, and this is actually a really good one where it can be a little impractical to open your windows for fresh air if it's -20 outside, and similarly if it's 110 degrees, you don't want to have your windows open. So a air exchange system, which usually is called an HRV or an ERV, which stands for Heat Recovery Ventilation Unit. The E one is Energy Recovery Ventilation Unit. Ultimately, they're the same function, but they depending on what climate you're in, what part of the country, it'll be one or the other to maybe help preserve heat inside the home. But they're doing the same thing, which is to help improve your ventilation directly in an energy efficient way without having to open up, a bunch of windows and doors. So kind of tying it all together, ventilation is a very important step in improving your air quality. Another one would be looking at kind of your obvious sources. And when I say obvious to those who are looking into the space of trying to take their indoor health seriously, but looking at obvious sources of pollutants. So if that's air fresheners, anything scented, anything of that sort, that's a very manufactured, chemically kind of smell, just don't use it. There's a lot of other natural ways you can work to, mask odors or help get rid of odors there. And honestly, the better way to look at it, it's kind of funny because, those plug-in devices like you'll have on your wall, like a Glade unit, they're called air fresheners. Really what they should be called is air makeup devices. It's just covering up a scent by adding a bunch of chemicals into the air. That's not really helping anybody. Really, there's this kind of misconception that a clean home smells like chemicals. Shouldn't be the case. A clean home should smell like nothing. There shouldn't be any odor. If it smells bad, like if there's sewage or something, of course you got to get rid of that because that's another air quality problem. But if it smells like manufactured chemicals, that's not a good thing either. A good home that's ventilated well and has good air quality shouldn't really have any odor whatsoever. It should just, kind of be a neutral state of air. That's really what you want to be looking for. So getting rid of those obvious sources, ventilation. And then one of the main steps as well is then, of course, taking a step up, and that's filtering your air, because that's a hugely important component too, where not only are you helping your ventilation, helping the home breathe, not having obvious sources of pollutants in the home, but then using an air filter to capture those chemicals, those pollutants, those airborne allergens and particulates, and then helping to remove them from the air. Because the important way to look at this is that if you don't have an air filter, your lungs become the filter. You are the thing that's taking on all of the, it could be just general dust, it could be pollen, there's a lot of things, but without a way to filter it, you are the medium that those contaminants are going into.
This is where I noticed when I was cleaning up my house. So I have always had this dust issue. So I live in Texas and it's dusty outside. So and our windows actually aren't very sealed. So I was just constantly wiping dust, to the point where I just kind of gave up on it. And there'd just be this thick layer of dust, and it was
Mm-hmm.
disgusting. And I knew that this was bad, but I just couldn't get a handle on it. And that's when I heard Mike, and he was talking about the filtration, of course, the Jaspr product, but he also had mentioned that Corsi Rosenthal. So the fan with
Yes.
all the things. So that's what I built. I built one of those and I put it in my bedroom because I spend most of my office is also attached to my bedroom. So I spend most of my time in here. So you see my bookshelf behind me. Before every single recording, I had to dust this off. So once, twice a week, I was dusting this thing off. And since I've built this thing, I think I've dusted it once. That's how much this little homemade thing has done for just this one room in my house. However, I think I have a mold problem too, which I'll ask you about later. But what does the Jaspr product do, and how did it come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you the very quick backstory behind Jaspr. So it was founded, Mike, who's our founder, his background was in disaster restoration. So basically whenever there was a wildfire, flood, hurricane, and you'd have prolonged damages of whether it was burned down homes or flooded neighborhoods and mold damage and all these kind of real big issues that would come up. He would go in there and they would do the remediation. So they make sure the home was cleaned up, that it was detoxified, to ensure that the homeowners could move back in. And really, the inspiration for Jaspr came from, there was a wildfire in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada. This was the largest wildfire in Canadian history. It was a town of around 100,000 people. The entire town was evacuated. I believe it was around 5,000 homes completely burned down. Fortunately, though, 0 people died, which that was great. But the issues were, very prolonged and extensive after the wildfire, because it was such a large event that those contaminants that came from the wildfire, were lasting in the air for months and months at a time. And that makes it very tricky when you're trying to remediate and rebuild the homes, because even if you're doing all the cleanup, you're getting the stuff inside, but the outdoor air is so contaminated that you just can't get a grasp on getting the indoor air cleaned. And what he was finding was that when they would do the remediation, they would, use these industrial air scrubbers. And an air scrubber is basically a very high strength air purifier, but they're not very practical for prolonged home usage. They would be used during the initial cleanup phases. They would be used to really detoxify a lot of the high levels of, chemicals and particulates that were in the airspace of the home. And then once they were done, the scrubber comes out because the work is finished. They would find that the scrubber was really holding back a lot of those contaminants. And then once it was gone, even if they would buy multiple kind of off-the-shelf air purifiers, kind of like the ones you might see in like a Walmart or an Amazon, even with multiple of those devices, the air was, they would retest it and it would be just as contaminated as it was before. So you say, clearly this approach that they have now is just not working very well, needs something more effective. And so what he was thinking back to was the air scrubber, and kind of the idea of, let's get that sort of cleaning power, that technology, into something that is very adapted for residential usage, meaning one of two things. Number one, it has to be quiet, because air scrubbers are effective, but they're very loud. And if you have them running in your home, you'd not be able to concentrate on pretty much anything you're doing at any time. So it has to be quiet, and it also has to look good too. Because the other issue with the air scrubber, like the industrial ones, is, imagine sort of a combination of like a photocopier and a subwoofer. It's kind of ugly. It's not really nice to look at in the middle of your home, although it's working. So the idea was getting that same air cleaning power, but into something that looks and adapts very well into a modern residential home setting. That's where the inspiration for the Jaspr came from. So ultimately, with the Jaspr, we actually call it a Jaspr air scrubber and not an air purifier. And then the reason for that is because ultimately, by intention, it's meant to be an air scrubber. It's really, it's not just a little device that kind of purifies like your room or helps clean the room. This is a large scale cleaning machine that can cover a large area inside your home. It's pretty big. I mean, it's roughly about just under 3 feet tall, maybe a foot in diameter, but it's made of steel. It's made very durable, and it's super effective at, again, giving that kind of a scrub, like a deep clean of your airspace. It's helping to turn the air over multiple times in whatever space you're using it in an hour, so that you're really helping to remove a lot of those contaminants and particulates that are building up there. I see a question from Michaela, so I'll answer this one because this is a great question. So the question was, how many square feet does the Jaspr cover? And we love talking about this because honestly, there's a real problem in the air purification industry that does not explain this concept very well. So you'll see a lot of products out there that will say, oh, we cover 1,500 square feet. We cover 2,000 square feet. What they aren't explaining, though, is how high are the ceilings and how often is the air being turned over? Because there's a huge difference between 7-foot ceilings and 15-foot ceilings. If you have like a high living room, vaulted ceilings, like a great room kind of thing, there's way more cubic volume of air, which means there's that much more air to clean and turn over. And so the other important thing is, how often can you cycle the air through the space that you're using your machine in? Because, again, with those claims of, let's say, oh, we cover 2,000 square feet, if you do the math, it's actually, once every hour. I mean, that's not that good from an air cleaning perspective. You would like to have ideally 3 or 4, maybe every 15 to 20 minutes, you want the air cycled through. So to go back to the question, as far as one Jaspr, if you have normal ceiling height, so we're talking probably 8 or 9 feet, One Jasper will be great for around 700 square feet of space, and that will be giving you multiple air turnovers per hour. So that means whether you put it in, a bedroom, it's going to be fantastic. Any kind of like a home office space, but even if you have, kitchen living area, like a larger space, it will still be very effective for cleaning that area very well. Usually we'd recommend you have one for your kitchen area because particulate matter, there's a lot of it created from cooking and cleaning. And then, of course, for your bedroom to help dial in your sleep. So those are the two most important spots as far as coverage goes.
I was thinking, especially in this space, we cook a lot of beef. So we're splattering, or bacon. So we're splattering stuff all over the place. And I know I have found just like I have my ceiling fan and it's all sticky and all of the stuff then the dust is now stuck to the sticky, greasy stuff that's stuck to the ceiling fan, and it's just this ongoing problem. So if I had an air scrubber in my home, that would be significantly reduced.
You're talking about kind of like seeing the sticky stuff sort of accumulating there, and
it's not just that the dust is accumulating on it; it's that the grease particles in the air from cooking all that bacon on the stove is now sticking to everything. I'm like
Gotcha.
wiping. I have to like jump up on top of my counters and scrub on top of the cabinets all the time because we just have sticky stuff just floating around all the time.
Gotcha. Well, that's a good question. So I would say, to set the realistic expectation, you may not necessarily have a big reduction in kind of the splatter stuff you're seeing. Like a lot of that will just come from the cooking material itself. However, if you have and there's a few factors at play, but if you're using your range hood fan, and that's really important too. You want to use the range hood to help improve your ventilation in the kitchen because that's going to also help to pull some particulates out of the air. But that combined with good overall air movement in the home, plus having an air scrubber to filter the air, that kind of combined effort should help to have a reduction in dust. Because realistically, those sort of devices altogether will be helping to remove particulates that otherwise would be staying in the airspace, and then over time you start seeing them settle out of the air, like on kind of the hood there, or sort of the kitchen area, maybe on countertops as well, like your bookshelf too. But anything to do with directly filtering the air it should help to help reduce the visible dust that you're seeing there as well. So that would be a big factor.
Yeah, and then also thinking about this thing where if it's not this air scrubber that you have that's cleaning it out, it's our lungs that are doing it. So look at all the things that we're doing to our lungs if we're not taking care of the air in our homes. And it's just certainly something to consider. So now you've mentioned a couple of other things. So you said like we want to have our HVAC, or we want to have the windows open, and then now you just said like the fan. Like that's a good tip too. Like have the fan on while you're cooking. What are other small things that we may not even think about that we could do to help just clean our homes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll lead into this by touching on the fan one too a bit more. So yeah, just going back to the range hood briefly, very, very important to run it while you're cooking, and also to leave it on a little bit afterwards too. It's not like, okay, I turned the stove off, I'm going to turn this off. Let it run for a little period of time, because it's going to continue helping to pull, particulates and help kind of ventilate that immediate space that's above the stove. But a very important thing too is make sure that your range hood is actually venting out of the house. We've seen a number of cases where that range hood was literally venting into the cupboard above the stove. So it's doing absolutely nothing, and it's just pulling stuff into the cupboard. So that's not helping at all. So make sure it ventilates outside. On the topic of kind of hoods and ventilation, bathroom fan. So this is another key one. Again, might be obvious, but you really need to use that fan as it's designed, which is ultimately to help remove humidity from the air, in your bathroom. But it also will help to ventilate a little bit and help remove carbon dioxide too, because you're still creating a system where the air is being exchanged and pulled out. So that can help to dilute carbon dioxide a little bit, and get it out of the house. And a key thing is here, similar to the range hood, make sure your bathroom fan, again, ventilates outside. I've seen a lot of cases where the bathroom fan would actually vent into the attic, but it would just be like open into the attic and then that was it. No direct access outside. So the problem with that is you're using the bathroom fan as intended. Okay, pulling the humidity out of the bathroom air, like it's, pulling it through there. But then that moist, damp air is ending up in the attic where you have insulation and wood and raw material. That's ground zero for how you get mold all through your attic space. And then, that mold can come down the vent because it's not going outside. So it's a very open system where the mold spores can make their way down into the bathroom, into the rest of your home. So bathroom fan, make sure it vents outside, and also run it for a good period of time. A lot of times, the way it's used, kind of similar to the kitchen range hood, is that, okay, start the shower, turn the bathroom fan on. Oh, I'm done my shower, turn the fan off. Don't do that. Let that bathroom, even if you took a 5-minute shower, I would let that bathroom fan run at least half an hour after the shower's finished. Because when you're taking a shower, you're adding a ton of humidity into the space. You may as well have thrown a bucket of water onto the bathroom floor and then just left it. There's so much moisture and water activity in the bathroom, even after a relatively quick shower, and that needs to go somewhere. The worst thing you could do is like you use the bathroom, use the shower, get out of the shower, turn the fan off, and close the door. You've just created this hugely damp, moist environment where the air is now not going anywhere. That's how you can get, stuff like mold being able to form much more easily. So bathroom fan exchange or the range hood there. Those are some of the kind of the quick and obvious ones that we recommend. And one other thing that I'll discuss too is your furnace filter. This often gets confused as cleaning your airspace. And I want to sort of disabuse this notion that this is not the case whatsoever. So a lot of homeowners say, oh, well, I change my furnace filter every 2 months. I mean, my air should be pretty good. But the furnace filter is not in any way designed to actually filter or clean your airspace there. What it's designed to do is capture large dust, clumps, whether it's like a dust mite or if you have a pet, maybe fur or dander, that kind of thing. It's meant to protect the furnace, in like the interior of the furnace, from those large items there because they end up in the HVAC and the ventilation, they get blown around. You don't want it going into the furnace. That's what the furnace filter is for. Beyond that, it doesn't have any effect on filtering your air as a whole inside of your home. So it's not that it's not important, but don't think of it as an air filter because it's not. It's just there to protect the furnace inside your space.
And that's a really important point. I think most people probably think, oh, I put this HEPA filter on my furnace so I can breathe easier now, and it's really just keeping the inside of your ductwork clean in theory, and not necessarily what's coming out. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, you made me remember also that my very first house that my husband and I owned, our dryer actually vented into the attic. It didn't vent outside. So, that caused a whole issue of just hot, moist air sitting in the attic and getting all that insulation wet. So we had to rip out all the insulation and put all new insulation in and revent everything because it was creating a beautiful habitat for mold in the dark, hot,
Yes,
sticky
absolutely.
attic. So
Right.
we also had a flood in that house, and I've actually had a small flood here. So that's something I wanted to talk about. Like if you have pooling of water of any type in your home, what should we do? I mean, do we just dry it off, or should it be more of a like extreme, like we need to do some like ripping out walls, ripping out flooring, that kind of thing?
Sure. Great question. So when it comes to water pooling or sitting, a lot of it is the sort of immediate time frame that that will kind of dictate what happens going forward. So if you have, let's say there's a leak and you've caught it right away, like, oh, I noticed that yesterday everything was fine. Like, just say for example in your laundry room everything was fine. The next day you notice that there was some pooling underneath maybe the sink or the washing machine or whatever it is. So if you catch it early, you get it dried off. Usually that should be the end of it. Mold can start to develop in as little as around 2 to 3 days, so about 48 to 72 hours, if there's been sitting water and you have humidity that's high enough and it's on the material that can allow mold to grow. I mean, realistically, if you had just kind of an isolated thing of water or sort of puddle of water sitting on like a concrete floor, probably fine, likely not a huge concern. But if that was spreading to the drywall or to insulation or to wood or carpet, then that's where the chance for mold becomes a lot higher because those items are effectively a food source for mold to grow. So if you catch the water early and then you get it dried off, get it taken care of, and it's not recurring, it's not coming back, you should be okay. But if you're discovering that, oh, you know what, it looks like there's been a leak here for quite a while, or I'm seeing water that looks like it's been sitting there and has been accumulating based on, hey, I can see that my baseboards showing, that kind of like a discolored material, coloration, and you're seeing that there's clearly been some water standing for a while. That's where it can make more sense to do some further investigation to check for mold. And it could be just maybe opening up a small spot. Like it could be, if it's on carpet, lift up the carpet, see what's happening underneath. It could be opening up, like pulling back the baseboard a little bit just to see what's happening on the drywall there. It could be maybe opening up a small hole in the drywall to see is there actually moisture behind there. Now, this also can get a little cumbersome as a homeowner if you don't have the proper tools, because you could very easily send yourself down a rabbit hole of like, I'm ripping apart my entire house, I'm not finding anything, and then nothing has really gotten solved. So what we would usually suggest is if you are seeing obvious signs of mold, like discoloration and water activity, and it seems like it's been ongoing, and it seems maybe like it's behind the walls or drywall, it's probably a good idea to get a professional company in to actually take a look. And the best scenario would be a third-party testing company, meaning they only do testing. They're not there to do remediation or fixing up, because a lot of times what happens is you can get a company that says, oh yeah, we do a free mold assessment, and they do the remediation. And so then they find mold and they say, we found this, going to cost you X amount for us to fix it. So the best thing is a company that only does the consulting testing work, does not do remediation. They'll charge for their service, but they'll go in and do a thorough job. And that means that if it's a proper company, visual inspection, thermal camera to look behind the walls and see, hey, are there any dark spots that could be moisture? Moisture meter, where they can actually check moisture levels directly, and whether it's carpet or your wall, your insulation, to verify if there's moisture within there, because if there is, then that's could be a lot higher chance of mold. And they can also do the actual testing part, where they'll take air samples, maybe physical samples, surface samples or dust samples, outdoor readings, indoor readings for a comparison, send it to a lab, and you get a full report. And then they'll break it down for you, and they'll say, okay, we found this species of mold in this concentration in this area. Here's where we suspect it came from. We noticed this moisture content was higher in this wall, that kind of thing. But that would really be the most effective way to get a true sense of what's going on. And if they come back to you and say, hey, everything's okay, then the chances are that if they did it thoroughly, then all is good. But if they do find that they say, you know what, we did notice that, you have elevations of mold compared to outside, and you have these species of mold that typically are not found indoors, that are usually only found when there's a localized water problem. That's where then you may have to start looking at, do you go into remediation? And often these companies can kind of give you the right guidance. They might suggest it. They may say, maybe you can handle this part yourself, kind of thing. But that will be the best avenue to really explore if you want to get a sure sense of the full possibility of mold and water activity inside your home, and then what to do from there.
So in my case, and I'm sure other people fall in this category, we aren't the homeowners, but we have had a water issue. So we don't have the option of fixing that because it's not our home, despite the fact that we've told our landlord this issue. So what is something that we could do to try to help this issue?
Sure. Yeah, and that's always a tricky case, because you're, as you said, you're kind of stuck with, you can't really do that much when it's not the home that you own. But obviously, you need to live healthily in there, and if your landlord's not going to take care of it, that can complicate things. So what we'd suggest from there is really, at that point, you just want to look at the best mitigating factors that you can, meaning consider using a dehumidifier very frequently, and especially get a dehumidifier that has a digital readout of your humidity, because you really want to know. You don't want to be guessing. You want to know. You could say, oh, it feels like my dehumidifier is working, and for all you know, the humidity is at 68% constantly. So then potential for mold. So a digital readout dehumidifier shows you how much moisture is in the air, and you can then kind of set that threshold. Okay, I'm going to set it to this, and then as long as it's working properly, you can keep humidity low. That would be a good first step. Second one would be in some way improving your ventilation. So whether that's, if you can, opening windows, opening doors for the direct fresh air, assuming the HVAC doesn't have that built in, even using a fan to help just push air and cycle air through and kind of pull air out of the house. Like you can have a fan in front of a window and kind of help draw air out. That would be another way. So improving the ventilation, making sure the space is staying dry, and then using an air filter, an air scrubber to help clean the air and filter the air from any kind of possible mold that would be in the space. Those would really be the best steps that you could take, just to at least keep, a consistent level of indoor air health compared to if you weren't doing those actions there. And I mean, the discussion that can come up that is not an easy one, but if it's still feeling like there's a lot of stuff that's going on that you cannot fix, sometimes it is the easiest thing and the best thing for your health to find another place to live, which again, not easy, not always practical, but sometimes that is the only course to really fix things properly.
That's not off the table. My daughter's a senior in high school, and it might be we move the day after she graduates, but definitely something that we're discussing because that is the situation that we're in. So, Justin, this has been extremely interesting, and I know that you have a wealth of knowledge. So, this question is just going to be this broad question. You have a microphone and an audience. What do you want to tell people about air quality and health?
Well, I would say that it is the probably most overlooked but important pillar of health that you can take action for, and you can take action for very easily. Let me give you some context too. We look at three pillars of health: food, water, and air. So you eat, generally speaking, 2 to 3 pounds of food a day. You drink, I mean, it depends what your water drinking habits are, but you're maybe getting your 8 glasses, or some people will go like a half a gallon or even a gallon. Um, but you're consuming, as far as your air consumption, you are breathing often up to 20,000 times a day. You can be taking in around 14 to 15,000 liters of air in a day, depending on the body, on the person. So the amount of air that you're taking in is vastly overshadowing those other, very important aspects of your health, which are your food and your water consumption. And the problem is that it's not being thought of as a pillar of health. So a lot of people are very conscious of the food that they eat, especially if you're doing a ketogenic diet, you're of course very attuned to what you're eating, what you're putting in your body. Same with water. People will have a water filtration system, whether it's reverse osmosis or just even a standard water filter, or from your tap or whatever it is, but a way to clean the water. But the air that you're taking in on a day-to-day basis is not being filtered or cleaned in any way. And when you spend so much time indoors, when you have so much indoor air pollution, and really when we're going back to those topics of when you're sleeping, the only thing that you're doing to keep your body alive is breathing. You're not eating, you're not drinking, and it's not even a conscious effort. Your body knows unconsciously, when you are, not awake, how to breathe and how to bring in air. So if that air that you're breathing in is very polluted and very contaminated, you're not doing your body any favors. And in fact, you're making it fight constantly to, just to really keep you going. And that's what can lead to poor sleep quality, because your indoor air is so poorly contaminated. And a good analogy that you can really look at is, think of your body as a cup. And what happens is, during our day, our day-to-day life, that cup becomes pretty full. And that can just be day-to-day stressors, just from general like work stress, or, anxieties or whatever it may be. But there are also physical stressors too. If you're in, for example, a moldy office, or, a school that has really poor ventilation, it's very stuffy, and you go home and you're in a space that's not ventilated well, and you have mold and you have VOCs and these other issues. So that cup continues to fill up through the day because your body is taking on these items here. What should happen is that when you go to sleep, you're giving that cup a chance to empty out. If you have a well filtered and well cleaned environment from an air perspective, that cup can empty. And then in the morning, you have, you're much more rejuvenated. Your body's in a much less stressed state because your lungs are not taking in high levels of contaminants all night, when again, the only thing you're doing is breathing. But if you're not looking after this environment, not only are you not emptying your cup is now overflowing. And you're waking up in the morning with your cup full, and you haven't had a good quality sleep because you've been breathing in all this bad stuff all night. And then you have to take on a whole new day of all these new things that, or, the same things, but a new day, all over again, without having given your body a chance to actually recover. So it's a massively important thing to think about: the air that you're breathing. If it's filtered, if it's in a clean state, you're doing yourself so many favors. And it's such an easy thing to do as well, because it doesn't require any exercise. You're not having to push yourself. You're not having to, shop for healthy foods and get an expensive water filtration system. You use a device that just you plug in, you start breathing like you always do, but now you're in a much healthier state when you're doing so.
And I don't even think about it. I'm just breathing all of the time. So that's a great way to describe that. And these conversations comes up all the time. I'm doing everything right. I'm eating right. I'm exercising. I'm getting my sunlight. I have my
Hmm.
blue blocking light and my glasses on, so I'm not getting the light. I'm doing all these things, and yet I still can't sleep. This seems like the very logical next step is to, hey, let's look at what's in your air and what you're breathing, and are you emptying your cup while you're asleep? It's such a great analogy. Thank you for that. So we really
Hmm.
haven't talked about this product so much. So Jaspr, which is Jaspr, not spelled like you
Yes.
would think, and it's jasper.co is the website, correct?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah, that's the
.co.
website.
So tell us about this product, this air scrubber, what it does, how we can get it. I know it's going to use a filter, how we get filters for it, all of the stuff.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So Jaspr, ultimately, the Jaspr Air Scrubber is really it is a very nice looking machine, but ultimately it's doing a very simple thing, which is to clean your air. And we've by design made the usage of it as easy and straightforward as possible. And what I mean by that is that the filter itself is an all-in-one design. So that filter is really, of course, what's actually doing the work. The Jaspr itself is just kind of the body that houses the filter. And it's sort of like with, you're talking about Robyn, your Corsi Rosenthal box. I mean, that's ultimately, that's doing more or less the same thing, which is fan plus filter equals cleaner air. The difference is that with the Jaspr, it gives you a much simpler way of getting the air clean because you're not having to build it, of course. It does look quite nice inside your home. It's made of steel. It's not made of plastic. But also the filter itself is very industrial grade, but very simple in the design. So it's around 4.5 pounds, and this is just the filter. So it's a cylindrical device, meaning there's more surface area than a flat filter, which most other purifiers have a flat filter. So Jasper's is cylindrical. And there's 3 layers to it. So there's your pre-filter, which is for basically large dust and debris. You can kind of look at the pre-filter like your furnace filter in the HVAC. So that's your pre-filter. Then you have the HEPA layer, and this is arguably the most important one. This is for all of the fine particulates. So whether it's, pollen or dust or dander or, the skin cells, any smoke, anything of that, that is the fine particulates that goes into the HEPA filter. So that HEPA filter is preventing those fine particles from entering your, blood, your lungs, your bloodstream at a much higher level. Then there's the carbon layer, which is for chemicals and VOCs. So carbon does help to remove odors and chemicals from the airspace there. Again, and I will reiterate this until the day I die, in conjunction with ventilation. So ventilation plus carbon will help to remove VOCs, but it's not an either or. It's really both combined gives you the best result. So those 3 layers make up the filter of the Jaspr, and that's what goes inside. That's what's actually cleaning the airspace. But we've made the Jaspr very simple in that you don't actually have to really use it constantly as far as touching or activating or anything like that. You plug it in, you turn it on, and there's a smart mode, which is what most people use. And this is where it will auto adjust to changes in the air, meaning you don't have to guess, oh, should I be running it higher? Should I be running it lower at this time? Let's say you have a Jaspr in your kitchen or living area and you cook something, very smoky on the stove. Once that sensor in the Jaspr picks up on the particulates that are increasing from the cooking activity, the fan actually ramps up by itself and you'll hear it ramp up because by default, it's going to run at the lowest speed, which is very quiet. That's how it's intended. But if there is a sudden change in contaminants, then the Jaspr senses and it will increase the fan because what it wants to do is cycle the air through more quickly, give you more air exchange, air turnovers per hour. Once it senses that the pollutants are at a safe level again, then the fan automatically goes back down. And the best part of this, the entire time, there's a large display screen that shows you what the air quality actually is. So you can literally see the amount of particulates in your airspace. And that's kind of a way that your Jaspr is keeping score of the air quality. But this way, this is completely removing the guesswork because, again, it's not a situation of like, I don't know, maybe my air is polluted. I'm not really sure. Who knows? You can see the number, you can hear it going, you can see it ramping up by itself, and then it goes back down. So it's taking all the guesswork out of it. You don't have to have any kind of intuition to it. You just plug in the Jaspr and let it run, and it will clean the airspace for you. And then other than that, aside from changing the filter every 6 months is the standard, main reason for this is that the carbon layer tends to run out at this point. So this is kind of interesting. It's activated carbon, which means once you open it up, it's continuously working to capture chemicals and odors there. Even in a low usage setting, the carbon will have depleted around 6 months. So that window, it just ensures, optimal Jaspr performance. It also makes sure that the HEPA layer is not getting too clogged up, because some filters will look really nasty after about 6 months, depending, if you have like carpets or pets and bad ventilation in your home, a lot of factors to it. But you want to ensure that it's not getting too clogged up. So that window is the optimal replacement cycle. But aside from that, that's it. You don't have to clean it. You don't have to vacuum it. There's nothing to wash. You just let it do its thing in the background. It is quite literally the laziest way to stay healthy inside of your home, is by using one of these.
Well, I like lazy and I like being healthy, so that sounds good to me. I definitely want to upgrade from my system that I've created. I was like just so ill, and when I heard about that, I was like, I'm making this right now, and it has made a difference. But I only have the one, and it's only in this room, so it sounds like this better system is in my future for sure, because I know I'm definitely dealing with that mold in my house that I can't do anything about. So I really appreciate you explaining this. You said the carbon for this filter, which brought me back to us talking about the ventilation of the hoods on the oven hoods, the range hoods. A lot of those have a carbon filter, and they do. It's hard to find one that actually ventilates outside anymore. A lot of them do the carbon filter. Do you know how often those are supposed to be replaced?
I'll be honest, I do not know. Actually, myself, interestingly, I haven't seen many ranges with a carbon filter there, but I'm curious about that. I want to look into that too, because
Okay,
it's a
so
good idea.
it's really
Yeah.
funny because I did look into this, because I was like, this thing doesn't vent anywhere. It just goes through this filter and it comes back out the top. Above it is a cabinet, and it doesn't go into the cabinet. It just goes through this filter, and then there's vents and it comes out the top. So I looked it up and I
Got
was
it.
like, how often is this thing supposed to be replaced? Once a month. It's supposed to be replaced monthly. Can you find them in a store anywhere? No. So it's a very strange system that we're just putting these vent hoods in that actually serve no purpose whatsoever. You're just spitting out. You're just spitting it right back out again. It's going in, coming right back
Right.
out. So uh, it's like we're set up to, our best intentions are failing us, because we're set up with this thing, and then we don't actually have the the way to replace it. It's a user error that most people don't even know about. The filters for Jaspr, I think I remember seeing that you can like pay into a plan where it happens. Does it happen every 6 months for you?
Yes, exactly. So we have it very simply set up where when you order the Jaspr, it'll have that plan set up for you, where it's basically that every 6 months you'll get the new filter. It's just to ensure simplicity of it. So we also want to make it clear, it's not like you're like locked in forever. You can always delay a filter. Like if you're, going to be away when the 6 month window's coming up, no problem. We'll have it sent out later. You can also cancel it at any time. If you want to just order filters on your own, no worries whatsoever. But this is just, most people prefer this option because they don't have to remember this way when it's time to change it. And as well, with the automatic filter renewals, it's also bundles your Jaspr to the lifetime warranty. And this is really where we stand out from pretty much any other purifier brand, is that we have the lifetime warranty. So if anything does happen to your Jaspr, they work pretty well, but if anything happens to it that we can't resolve the issue, we simply send you a new one, we take the old one back, and that's it. We're very, we trust our customers, and we're very hassle-free when it comes to that. It's our commitment to you that this should be the last air cleaning device you ever have to buy. And that's really the goal that we're trying to set.
Yeah, and I noticed that I can feel that from the company. I subscribe to the letter that comes out, and I've looked at the YouTube pages and all the stuff, and it just feels like it's a family who wants to help your family. And I've been excited to talk to you about all of this, because like I said, it's just so overlooked. It doesn't make any sense that we don't think about it, but I'm glad that you guys are out there and you're thinking about it, and that you've created this product that can help us. All we got to do is plug it in, and there we go. We can start sleeping through the night again, and breathing easier. All of that is wonderful. So where can people, if they have questions, where can they go to either speak to you or find out more about Jaspr?
Sure. So our website has a lot of, pretty much most of the common questions that one might have about the Jaspr. So you can go to, it's just Jaspr, Jaspr, so no E in there, jaspr.co. There's an FAQ section. There's a product specification section. So all of the relevant information that you should want to know about is on the website there. But if you have any questions, there's also our contact form right on the website. You can send us an email, and then from there, we're always happy to, just explain further if you have any inquiries or just general questions about, air quality. And honestly, Robyn, we really, and I appreciate the kind words that, you said in the previous kind of sentence there, that we really look at ourselves as more of an air education company and not a product company. We, of course, have the product, the air scrubber, but first and foremost, our goal is to educate, and it comes from just our background of seeing these issues and seeing how prevalent they are throughout most people's lives and without them really realizing it. And we just want to be able to spread the important word. So if you come to Jaspr and you have questions and you don't buy one, like, that's no problem. Like, if we helped improve your knowledge of indoor air quality, that's a win for us too. So that's really what we're trying to get here, is just spreading the awareness of this important topic that is often overlooked. But obviously we have, in my opinion, a pretty good solution for a lot of those issues that will come up as well.
And that definitely shows. It shows that I mean, we had a conversation and we probably went 45 minutes before we even mentioned the word Jaspr, except for that I introduced you as someone who works for the company. That definitely comes through, and it does make you feel comfortable as just a person out in the world that has questions, to know that we can come to you guys and you're not going to try to sell something. It's really about that education. And I feel that from everything that I've received so far from the company. You're just teaching us you can do these things that are better for you. So that definitely comes across in everything that y'all do. Justin, it has been lovely speaking to you. I'm sure there's so much more that we can learn. So everyone, go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, because it's very interesting. I've learned a lot about mold. I think I signed up like 2 months ago. I've learned a lot about mold. I've learned a lot about just air quality in general, just from getting that newsletter. Little things that I can do in my own house to try to make things better. And I still have not purchased the product yet, and been able to make those other steps. However, if you can, please go buy the product and then tell me all about it so I can be jealous.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone, thank you for listening to Ketobiography. See you next time. Bye.